Hey everybody, I'm Gigi Rosenberg, and I'm here to give you a little technical advisory about the podcast you're about to watch. Now, if you're listening, this doesn't apply to you because the audio is perfect, but if you're watching, you may notice that every once in a while, my guest Deb Dana's image freezes. Just know it's us, it's not you. We've done our best to cover it, and we still decided to post it because her interview is so good. So please enjoy my conversation with Deb Dana. Welcome, everybody. I'm Gigi Rosenberg, and I'm a public speaking coach, and I am so delighted to be here today with Deb Dana. Before I introduce her, I want to tell you how I discovered her. I am a longtime fan of Tammy Simon and the Sounds True publishing empire. And one day I get an email about a new training they have, and I think it was called something like Befriending Your Nervous System. So I tend to be a fairly nervous person, but I work with very nervous people, public speakers. And I thought, okay, that's for me. And in my research, I came across one of Deb's books, Anchored, which I loved, then started listening to many of her podcasts, then picked up a couple of her other adorable little books, which I love. And I realized how much of her teaching about something called polyvagal theory, which we're going to get into today, can really be applied to public speakers. And it was so fascinating to me of so many of the things I teach. I'm coming at it from a totally different angle. So we're going to talk today about really how to calm down, but from a totally different lens. So let me introduce her and then we will get going. Deb Dana is a licensed clinical social worker using polyvagal theory to understand and resolve the impact of trauma and create ways of working that honor the role of the autonomic nervous system. Deb is well known for translating polyvagal theory into a language and an application that's both clear and accessible, which is why I'm so excited to talk to her today, and for pioneering something called the rhythm of regulation methodology, which are tools, techniques, and practices for people from all walks of life, including public speakers. She has many accolades, has written many more books than I just showed you, and her latest is called the Nervous System Workbook, which is coming out from Sounds True in early November. So just a few weeks from now. I got a preview copy of it. It's excellent. We'll be digging into some of those pages today. So welcome, Deb. I am so excited to have you here.
Oh, it's such fun to be here with you and venture out of the world of clinical practice for a moment, because I do love how we can do that, right? Everybody has a nervous system. So it's applicable to any profession, any walk of life, any person. So I'm curious to see how we bring it into public speaking.
Great. Fabulous. So this is where I want to start. Rather than starting with defining what is polyvagal theory, what I want to do is start in a different way, something very hands-on. And I want to describe, I'm going to use myself as an example, what can happen to me and many of my clients right before we're about ready to walk on the stage. So I'm getting ready to walk on the stage. It's a big room, maybe filled with 150 people. And I'm going to talk to them for maybe anywhere from 5 minutes to an hour. The physical sensations I'm feeling are, I can hear my heart thumping in my ears, which is freaking me out a little bit. I'm feeling hot, like maybe I'm coming down with the flu. My mouth is unbelievably dry. And even though I keep swigging bottles of water, it doesn't seem to help. And leading up to this, there's been a lot of mental chatter, like, why did I agree to do this? I never want to do this again. This is the last time I'm going to do this, et cetera, et cetera. And then, they turn to me and say, Gigi, you're on. So I want to ask you, from that point of view, what is going on with me?
Your nervous system is in that place of some sympathetic anger, anxiety, the fight flight world, which is the first survival response that appears for us when we feel that the world is a little too much. And your preparation for going on stage is in that world of, you feel the physical sensations, you've got the brain that's doing its chatter, and I loved what you said, because it's so common to when we're in that place. It's this, oh my God, why did I ever get to do this? I'm never going to do this again. You can hear the energy and the chaotic, disorganized thinking. And the same is true in our body. You've got things going in the gut, you've got heart, you've got breath, you've got temperature, everything is sort of out of regulation. Right? We call this the beginning of dysregulated state. It's adaptive because our survival states are always adaptive, and we can talk in a bit about you do need sympathetic mobilizing energy. You just need it within a certain range. And it feels like as you're talking, that range might be a little bit outside your comfort zone, right? But then I'm curious, what happens when you get on stage and start speaking? Then what happens?
Well, it's interesting because I get on and the first few moments I've rehearsed and I practiced. So I'm doing what I said I was going to do. And sometimes there's a feeling of I'm two people.
Mm-hmm.
There's the me doing what I said I would do. And there's the me going, oh my God, get me out of here.
Right.
But then it's funny. I notice with me about 2 to 3 minutes in, somehow those two people become one.
Mm.
And then if it's going well, whatever that means, but if I think it's going well, then it starts to be a little fun. Then I can relax. Then I can get playful. Then my sense of humor comes back.
Yeah.
And I'm okay. And after it's over, I'm like, when can I do that again? And I can barely remember the me who was thinking, get me out of here, know?
And then again, that's the beauty. We can follow the nervous system. It moves back up into regulation, right? It takes a little while and you sort of this two people. So you get some sympathetic, why am I doing this anxiety? And then you begin to feel more of the ventral, we call it regulation, and they begin to come together. When ventral, then there's more ventral in your system than sympathetic, then you become playful and you begin to enjoy it. And then you get in a flow, right? And when you're done, the nervous system has brought you to this place and it works with the brain to say, well, let's do that again because it felt good. Right? If you stayed in that sympathetic anxiety the whole time, you'd get to the end and your nervous system would not allow that thought. It would keep you in survival, where people might say, oh, we want to have you come and talk again, Gigi. And your system, everything in your system will be going, no. Your brain might say yes, because often the brain is in disagreement with the embodied response, but your nervous system would be saying, no, don't do it. Right? Yeah. So I love that you come to the playfulness and the ease and the flow and that's what we want. We actually want the beginning to be not quite so intense. Right.
So that's my question for you. When I actually had an experience recently I'm going to tell you about, just because it was based on my reading. I had to read a poem for, it was for about 100 people. But reading a poem on my level of hardness is I'm reading the poem. I mean, so it wasn't that hard. But I did notice a couple minutes before I knew I was going to go up, I did feel my heart start to beat again. My mouth was dry and I kept drinking water. And, but I did something different this time. What I did was I thought, oh, there's my sympathetic nervous system kicking into gear. And then I said to myself, do I feel safe? Mm-hmm. Because I feel like sometimes I'm imagining, and I looked around the room at all the kind faces and I thought, I'm safe.
Yeah.
And even though my heart kept beating, it didn't escalate. It just stayed right there. And so it wasn't as uncomfortable as it could have been other times. So that's what I got from listening to you and reading the books, which was great.
Yeah, because the nervous system is always using that question, am I safe or not? And if the answer, if you look around, you saw friendly faces. You used co-regulation, which is a beautiful nervous system-based skill, to see faces and they were smiling, and that reassured your nervous system, and your brain then said, oh yeah, I'm safe, or safe enough. Safe enough is usually where we go, not safe, but I'm safe enough. And then the all of those dysregulating things you talked about before didn't happen. You stayed at a level of, it was manageable. right?
Right. It
Right.
was
It was giving
manageable.
you a
Yes.
cue that you're going to do something that is a little, a little out of your norm. So you need a little bit of this paying attention. We want to be alert, right? But not alarmed. That's how I differentiate it. You're alert when you have some of that sympathetic energy, but it's still held in the safety of ventral. You're alarmed when you feel unsafe and it's just sympathetic.
Right.
And I think alert is really, a good place for us to be when we're heading into an experience of talking or teaching, because then I call it being regulated and ready.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. That's great.
Yeah. And it's interesting because some people, just to throw this in, go to that anxiety place, but then they go to the collapse shutdown and simply can't speak,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
lose their words, they lose their capacity. And your system doesn't do that, which is lovely. But
Well, you know
in,
what's
yeah,
interesting? I printed out from your upcoming book
yeah,
that
yeah,
list of
yes,
what it's like to be in regulation,
yeah,
what it's like to be in fight or flight, and then what it's like to be in shutdown.
yeah.
And I circled, regulation for me when
Hmm.
I'm presenting playful flow, and I'm honest and I'm funny
Yeah, I
too,
love it. Yes,
because
yeah,
honesty is hilarious.
yes,
When I'm in fight or flight, I'm anxious, worried, nervous, and possibly panicked if I
yeah,
keep.
yes.
And it's funny in shutdown, before I looked at this list, when I was thinking
Hmm.
about talking to you, I have had the experience and I realized it was shutdown of being so nervous. I felt disembodied, like I was
Yes,
floating. And I looked at the
yes,
list and I'm like, oh my God, floating is on the list.
exactly.
Foggy, numb,
Yeah,
collapsed.
yeah,
Because I
yeah,
work with people who
yeah.
say, I get up there and I can't think anymore.
Hmm.
So they're edging into shutdown.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and shutdown is sort of the path of last resort for your nervous system. It takes you there when it has the experience that nothing else is gonna rescue you, right? Because the nervous system is always working to keep you safe. And as crazy as it sounds, floating, numb, shutdown is sometimes the nervous system's thought that this is the safest place for you. Yeah, yeah,
Right, right.
yeah,
Wow. So I think I want people to understand, maybe not be able to teach it to somebody else or repeat it, but at least understand what polyvagal theory is.
yeah.
And I have to say, the one thing that has always confused me is I don't understand why it's called a theory, because to me a theory is like, oh, it could be, might not be,
Yeah,
whatever. So
yeah,
tell us what polyvagal theory is.
mhm,
And I know we've been already touching into it, and then
yeah.
I'd love to know why it's called a theory and not I don't know,
Uh,
something else.
Right, right. Well, okay, so we have touched into all three. There are three organizing principles that I think are really important, and we've touched on all of them, but we can go back and really identify them a bit more. Neuroception is that beautiful word that Steve Porges created that describes how your nervous system takes in information. Right? We know how the brain does. It does it cognitively through perception, but the nervous system takes it in through experiencing cues of safety or danger through what happens in our body, like your speeding up heart rate, your dry mouth, your temperature change, cues of danger nervous system is feeling outside in the environment. So maybe when you looked out and saw friendly faces, that was a cue of safety. Right. And then in the between, and I love the between, it's like your nervous system and mine are getting to know each other. And there's a conversation that's happening simply beneath the level of language of our nervous systems, right? My nervous system is enjoying your nervous system. It feels very welcoming and safe. And that goes on all the time. We don't think about that, but it's happening. So that's neuroception. And when the cues of safety outweigh the cues of danger, we feel regulated and ready. But when the cues of danger outweigh the cues of safety, we move into fight and flight or collapse and shutdown. So that takes us to the second organizing principle, which is hierarchy. Neuroception moves you on the hierarchy somewhere. And Steve identified this hierarchy that I love because it's predictable, right? You're in ventral, you're in regulation and readiness and connection when the cues of safety outweigh the cues of danger. When that equation shifts, the first place you go is to fight and flight. Every nervous system goes there next. Some of us stay there like you did, and you got on stage and came back to regulation. Other people move from fight and flight to the last place on the hierarchy, the lowest place, to shut down and collapse, which is called dorsal, right? So shut down, collapse, floaty, numb, foggy, all of that, right? And then in order to return to a place where I could actually walk on stage and speak, I have to move out of shutdown, bring some energy back in, which is sympathetic, not bringing anxiety, but bringing energy. And then I can come back to regulation. So that's hierarchy. And in every micro moment, we're somewhere on that hierarchy, right? We move down and up all the time. All the time. And then the third organizing principle that you touched on when you looked at people's faces is co-regulation, right? We are wired for connection with other humans, right? And when we look out and find a welcome through eyes, through smiles, through gestures, right? We then, our nervous system responds and feels safe. That's a cue of safety. So you looked out. If you had looked out and seen faces that were unsmiling or blank or just neutral, you would have had a very different nervous system response.
That's true. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Wow.
Yeah. So that in a nutshell, that's polyvagal theory. So, it's simple, not easy, I guess. It's 3 organizing principles that are always doing this. And it can feel like, where am I? Which is the first question. Where am I? We're on the hierarchy. Where am I? Because that then leads to, okay, what do I need to do to come to a place of feeling safe enough and ready?
Right.
And it's interesting. My work I call my work an approach, not a model, right? Even in the clinical world, it's an approach. It's not a model. And Steve, this is a theory, right? And he's a scientist and academic. And in that world, you put out a theory, you put out hypotheses with the expectation that people will, challenge and either confirm or, challenge and find it's not true in some way. His theory has been around for decades now, and thousands of peer-reviewed articles are supporting what he is putting out there. So, but as he says, it will always be a theory, right? It's because that's the world of science and
I guess so.
academics.
Yeah.
And in my world, it will always be an approach, not a prescribed model, because what I like to do is help people understand these organizing principles. And I do have a lot of ways to help people work with their nervous system, both clinicians and curious humans, I call us, the rest of us. And you're also welcome to create your own, right? So it's,
right.
And that's what I love about this way of working, that I'm giving you a frame, right? Whether you're a clinician or a curious human or both, obviously, I'm giving you a frame. Within that frame, it's not you do step 1, 2, 3, 4, and you reach the end. Within the frame, you're doing this all the time, right? You're listening to the nervous system and responding to what it's telling you in the moment.
Right. So, best case, you're in ventral or very regulated the moment you walk on the stage.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I find that many people it takes them a couple minutes and then they land and then they're there.
Yeah.
So I feel like I'm always working with my clients and with myself. I wouldn't have said this before I, got introduced to you, but how can I be in ventral the moment I walk on?
Yeah.
Knowing it's going to come, but how can I do that off stage?
Right.
Do you have any thoughts about that?
I do, because you're right. You don't want to walk on stage and then have to wait for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. If that happens, and that happens to all of us sometimes, if we enter into a moment when we're supposed to be here, present, regulated, and speaking, and we're not quite there yet, right? We're not totally dysregulated, but we haven't quite landed yet. We can notice and name that. We can say that with whoever the audience is and say, ooh, so I just walked out here and it's going to take me a moment to land. How about if we land together?
Wow.
Right?
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah.
That's that connection, and that, because if you are not quite regulated, you are sending that message to everybody in the audience, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you might as well notice and name it and invite people
Yeah.
to do it with you. So we do that with clients all the time. It's like, I'm not quite ready. Let's land together. Let's arrive together. So that's if I'm not quite ready. And for many of us, that's probably true. We walk on stage and it's like, ooh, I have to orient to the lights, the people, the all of the noise, all of that. That's your nervous system. That's neuroception, finding the cues of safety and danger. And there are always cues of safety and danger happening. So, below the level of awareness, that's what's happening. When I've been on stage where the lights are so bright, you can't see a thing, right? You can't see someone in the audience. That's a cue of danger, right? And we sometimes don't get a chance to practice before. Right. That would be the other thing I would say. If you can make that walk before you have to make
Right.
it with
Right.
people, your
Yeah.
nervous system gets that experience.
Yeah,
I get that your
absolutely.
brain is doing it too, but really it's your nervous system that gets to walk out there, feel the dysregulation, and find the way to regulation. And the nervous system wires in that memory. Right. So
Yeah.
if you get to practice before, that's really lovely to do. So we've got two ways. What if none of those are possible? Right. And you're waiting to walk out there and you're feeling. Let's take sympathetic anxiety first, because that's so much easier to work with. Right. Then it's like, what are I call them anchors. What are my anchors that I can hold on to so that I'm reminded ventral lives in my system. My nervous system knows how to get there and will help me get there. Let me partner with it right in this moment to find a bit more ventral, right? And anchors are they're people that we could have with us or around us, or we could remember their face and their words. There are, really objects. I'm doing this because I often carry a beach stone with me. Beach stones are my anchoring objects, and how easy to stick one in your pocket. Right. I was doing a newish workshop just recently, and I've never tried it with people before. And I told them that. And I said, and I put a stone in my pocket to remind me that ventral is here with us. Right. So an object that you can hold on to. Sometimes we have certain things we wear that feel like touchstones. And I always encourage people, wrap up in the thing, the jewelry, the shoes, the sweat, whatever that reminds you you're held in ventral, right? So there are these things we can do beforehand that remind our nervous system. We have ventral and the nervous system. I truly believe the nervous system knows how to get there, right? So if we can just get on the path, it will take us the rest of the way. So those are some of the things. And
That totally jives with, what I talk about in terms of how important rehearsal is. And if you can get on that stage ahead of time.
Mhm.
And, sometimes I'll even say, lie on the stage, sit in the audience, make it feel like it's familiar. If the stairs are shaky, you want to know that now so that when you walk onto them
Right,
at the final thing and they shake, that
right,
doesn't scare you,
right, right.
So that, yeah,
I mean
that
that,
really
and
makes
again,
sense.
unpredictable, unfamiliar are
Right,
pretty reliably cues of danger to the nervous system.
right,
So
right.
you're asking them to walk it already so that it becomes a bit familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
I was on
Wow.
a stage, last week, and every time I walked a certain place, it squeaked. And it
Oh,
was like, oh my goodness. And so I noticed and named it with my people because I knew so I stopped for a minute. I said, can
yeah.
you hear that? And then I did it a few times. Can you hear
Oh
that?
my God. That's
Because
so great.
you're just
Yeah.
inviting them into your experience, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Many, many years ago, I went to a Liza Minnelli concert, and she had complained during rehearsal that the stage was too slippery. So they
Oh,
put some tacky stuff on it. So she gets up there and she goes, I want you to hear this. And she took the microphone and put it down, and we could hear her shoes sticking to the stage. And it
yeah.
was so funny. And then the guys came on and mopped it to get the stickiness away. But you're right. It was a way for us to immediately feel like we're with the speaker. you know.
Yes. Yes. And that's that sense of community, of co-regulation, of connection. That
Yeah.
is a ventral property, right? So
Yeah.
again, if we talk about what's possible in ventral, it's possible to make that connection, feel that connection. If you're in sympathetic, other people become dangerous. We see others as dangerous. We feel the world is dangerous. And you're going to go out on that stage and it's impossible. Not that you don't want to, be centered and grounded and welcoming. It's biologically impossible, right?
Right. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
again,
Yeah.
we need to have some of that ventral so that
Yeah.
we're able to connect. And from dorsal,
Right.
it's totally,
Right.
we don't even know we're on stage or there are people there,
Right.
right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll tell you one of the things I do. I grew up with parents who were uber extroverts,
Mm,
and there were always people at our house. That's a whole other story. But
yep, I'll bet.
I'm very good at being the host.
Mhm,
It puts me in a place of I definitely feel like I'm the authority because it's my house,
mhm.
and I also feel very generous of spirit.
Yeah.
So if I'm in sympathetic or feeling nervous, I mean, I don't know what I'm doing, but what I'm doing for myself is I'm saying, you're the host. It's your party.
Right.
Like it gets me all my attention off myself and then
Yep.
out on the people like, oh, how are you doing? And
Right.
that way.
Yes.
So being the host for me can be, I don't know what you would call that, but it's like a direction
Yep.
that suddenly puts me in a different state of
Yeah.
mind.
Well, your embodied memory of being a host is of feeling that generosity of spirit, that caregiving for others, that sense of safety that comes with that. If being a host, if growing up being a host had been a really challenging experience that you had to do, you would not be able to use that memory of being a host to bring your ventral alive. But see that these experiences are wired into our nervous system, right? Our brains tell these wonderful stories. But if we go to the nervous system, all those experiences of being a host are wired in, and they're wired in a way that felt, regulating and connecting. And that brought that experience of being, of nourishing others, which again is available when you're regulated. So for you, you're bringing the memory of a
Right. That's
ventral
true.
experience
Yeah.
back to life.
And also when I'm the host, I mean, I'm in control. So it makes me feel safe that I'm
Mhm.
not relying on others. I'm relying on myself, which for
Yeah.
me, is my
Yeah.
go-to.
Yes.
So,
So when you are going to speak with others, does that change when you're in a, or don't you do that? Are you always public speaking on your own, or do you sometimes share
oh,
the
if
stage with
you
others?
mean if I'm sharing the stage? No, I would do that there too. But I guess I would change it to this is our party,
Right.
not
See?
my
Yeah.
party.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See?
Yeah.
Yeah. When your
Yeah.
nervous system knows how to do that, right? Because when I was asking you that, you had a bit of curiosity. You were sort of thinking about those are ventral experiences. And from ventral, you could come to, collaboration, and we'll change the language to our party. If that had taken you to sympathetic anxiety, you would not have been able
Mm.
to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's so
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, one thing I wanted to ask you is I think every speaker's dream is to, and I would have never used this language until I was introduced to your work, but to be regulating, like sharing, so that everybody is together.
Mm.
And I've definitely felt that myself at an incredible movie, at an incredible play, with an incredible speaker.
Mm.
And it's almost to me feels like you can't plan it. It's magical. It's something.
Yeah.
But how can you plant the seeds or create the environment where, if that's your goal, you're increasing the chances that it could happen?
Yeah. Yeah, it's lovely. I was thinking about that experience. We've had that experience too of feeling that we're all in this together. We're all on the journey together. And it's a pretty magical experience. And it doesn't happen all the time because you got to think you have many, 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 could be hundreds or thousands of nervous systems in the same place, and you would like them all to come on the regulated journey with you. And yet you never know what the cues of danger are for another nervous system. Right. And so we bump into those all the time. What is a cue of safety and a welcome and nourishing for my nervous system might be a cue of danger for another nervous system. So if we're all watching a movie, we never know where it's going to take it. If you're speaking, you kind of never know. So I usually front load it if I'm speaking, and really talk about that and say the invitation is right, because the nervous system needs to be invited. If it feels like there's an expectation or a demand, it will go to survival. But if there's an invitation and an acknowledgement that, when I'm talking, you're getting my images, you're getting my words, because, I've chosen them because they really nourish and feel regulated. They may not land for you in that way, and that's okay. So, we did the notice and name, but then we notice name, we normalize. And we think, because I don't know. I don't know who's in the room, what nervous system is in the room. And sometimes the magic happens. And yet, even when that magic happens, my guess is there's one or two nervous systems that didn't have that experience.
Right. I'm sure there are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That whole idea of choice is so key.
Yep.
Because even in that opening story I told you, I did agree to do what I didn't, feel like doing in that moment, but I wasn't being forced to do it,
right,
which did make a difference.
Yeah.
So I've also studied Alexander technique, and I can't remember the word off the top of my head that they use in Alexander technique, but it's being in agreement. Are you? It's another version of choice.
Yep.
Because if you're not in agreement, then it's impossible, or it's just much harder. And it's funny, if I've been hired to teach people public speaking who don't want to learn it, and they didn't sign up for it, it's really hard. And all I can do is keep making invitations. And it's so different from the vibe when they all have agreed to do this. Yeah.
And when you're with someone who we might say they didn't agree, and they're there and like, I don't want to do this. We can translate I don't want to is it doesn't feel safe enough in this moment. It's all about safety. The nervous system simply saying not safe enough yet. Right. And so your invitations may help them begin to feel a bit safer, and then they can feel a bit curious, and then they can begin to engage with. But if they stay in the not safe enough, there's nothing you can do.
Yeah, no, there isn't. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I want to turn now to the book that's coming out, the Nervous System Workbook. And I have a few pages marked that I just wanted to ask you about.
Sure.
And one of them is on page 132, something you call if then.
Mm-hmm.
And I do a version of this called What If?
Right.
So that ahead of time, you can think, well, what if my boss walks in? What if I spill my water?
Right.
What if my mouth gets dry, etc.?
Right.
But tell me explain to us what if then is all about, and maybe some thoughts about how that could be applied to public speaking.
Yeah. So I love your what if. I mean, that's great fun. My if then is really based on nervous system experience, right? So if I notice I'm getting sympathetically anxious in whatever situation, then I will, and you can fill in the then are the resources you will reach for to help come back to a little bit more regulation, right? And so, if when I am getting ready to walk on stage, I notice I'm beginning to float away, then I will, right? So they're different. You need to do if then with a bunch of different experiences about what might happen, and really just based on nervous system, because from floating away, you need to connect, you need to have some movement, feeling grounded. From sympathetic anxiety, you've got lots of energy, but it's chaotic, so you just need to organize it. So when we know the sort of range of what we can reach for, then we can fill in the if. And we have a lot of things. My clients would say, well, I'm going to see my mother, or I have to, go to work on Saturday night, or I have to, what we do a bunch of them. And then relates to what your nervous system response is. So it's very concrete, right? Because when the nervous system moves, you want to have a variety of resources that you can reach for depending on the intensity of that movement. So I might just begin to feel a little bit, like I'm going through the motions, but I'm not really here doing it. That's just a flavor. And I can have a resource if I notice I'm going through the motions, then I will, and I can fill that in, which is very different from if I'm totally not in my body. That's a different then. And you want to fill in the if then when you don't need them, right? Because you can't do it when you need them. So it's lovely proactive to and fill in a bunch of them. And what, with my clients, we'd do it together. We'd imagine what are some of the things that happen, what are some of the things that might happen, and we would do all these if thens. The other thing is write them down.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you can't find them in the moment.
In the moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
So an example of that might be my if then or somebody else's if then. Well, what happens if my boss walks in the middle? What am I going to do to keep on balance? Because he's a person who throws me off. So then you would make a list. I'm going to reach my hand in my pocket and touch that stone.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to feel my feet on the floor.
Yeah.
I could even be not look at him. I'm going to find the friendliest faces and just keep presenting to them. And just have a long list of things you can do.
Yeah. So if my boss walks in when I'm presenting and I feel my system going to anxiety, you have a list. Going to shutdown, you have a different list, right?
Oh. So tell me, is that how nuanced is that, the different list? Like what would be an example of anxiety versus shutdown?
I mean, and you said reaching for a stone, which can work for both.
Mm-hmm.
But in when you're having anxiety, you might reach for the stone and roll it around in your pocket. There's a little more connection. In shutdown, you're going to put your hand in your pocket and just feel, oh, I have a stone. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a nuance to how you use the resource.
Yeah.
I mean, it could, and movement's great. So if I notice I'm feeling, my boss walks in and I get anxious, maybe you walk around the stage more.
Right.
If he walks in and you begin to feel yourself floating away, you root yourself in one place.
Ground yourself. Yeah. So that's it's funny. That's why there are some instances where I feel a podium, which some people say, oh, it separates you from the audience, can be great to have because it's so grounding, and what's the big deal? You hang on to that thing. And if that's how you can do your best, so
exactly. Be it. Yeah. And that's the lovely thing. When you partner with your nervous system will tell you exactly what it needs. And some days, maybe it needs you to be behind the podium with you holding on with your hands there. Other days, what I find is, because I like to wander when I speak, when I teach, and yet there are times when I want to stand like next to and lean on. Right. Because then I know, oh, I'm also, okay, it's being held up. But your nervous system, if you learn to listen, your nervous system will tell you in this moment, this is what I need. Yeah.
Oh, that's so great.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. I wanted to talk also about page 135, something you call tune in, take in, and tend to.
Mm.
And I feel like I did half that when I was getting ready to read that poem.
Mm.
I tuned in to what I suddenly thought, oh, I'm in sympathetic, which helped keep me calm just doing that. And then I did the next step, which was take in. I looked to confirm, am I unsafe? Realized, no, I'm safe. But the tend to, I got tended to in that I didn't have to do anything more. So I'm just wondering if you could give an example of the tune in, take in, tend to. I think that's what I was doing in that moment, but I'd love to hear what you have to say.
And the tend to, as the tune in, you tuned in, you thought, oh, my sympathetic's getting a little big. right?
Right.
And the take in is sort of, what's going on here? What are all the ways that's being activated, right? And you looked around, and usually when we look around to take in, we find cues of danger and cues of safety. You found cues of safety, which then that was the 10-2. It's like,
That
oh,
was the 10 2.
connect
Yeah.
there. When we slow it down, usually people, when they take in, will find all the ways that sympathetic is being activated, right? And which might be too many people, or too much noise, or nobody I know, or people too close, any of those things. And then the 10-2 would be, what does my nervous system need in order to be able to feel a bit safer? And you did that by finding friendly faces. It said, I
Right.
need
Right.
connection. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that
Yeah.
was a lovely sort of, take in 10-2 came together, which was lovely. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's more disparate than that. And we have to say, okay, my nervous system needs, I need the people in the front row to be a little further back, or I need, I need, I need
Mm.
a little bit of more distance. I need, whatever it is. And again, that's the 10-2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what if you need something like that doesn't feel possible in the moment?
Yeah. So then if we've turned to and taken in, tending to sometimes is, okay, I know what my nervous system needs. So I'm going to acknowledge that with my system. And I can't physically move these people back. So I'm acknowledging, can't do that, right? Can I move back a little bit? Because what my system is saying, I just need a little more space. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. And if not possible, okay, let me sit right here or stand right here, and let me just be with and see what we need to do to accommodate that nothing else can change. Right? Because again, lack
Right.
of choice is activating
Yeah.
for the nervous
Yeah.
system. When
Yeah.
we acknowledge and then try to see what can we do to accommodate, the nervous system often will go with us, will help us. It needs to know you've gotten the message. That's the most important
Yeah,
part.
yeah. I
Yeah.
think what can happen with some people is if they can't get what they need, they go into, "Oh, you don't need that. Don't be a baby,"
Right, right, right.
And then it's a divided self.
Yeah.
And then that's this, for me, that's the road to hell.
Well, yes, yes. That's the override that the brain's doing. The brain says, ignore that, not needed. And I have discovered over my work and my own personal work, when the brain and the nervous system are in disagreement, the nervous system is going to win. Right?
Yeah,
And your brain may say, "Oh, ignore that, forget it," and move forward. Your nervous system is going to make you pay the price for that.
yeah.
So if
No,
we
it's
can
so
turn
true.
toward it and listen, and then see what can we do, because that diminishing of the nervous system experience, we do that, we're taught to do that, I think, in our culture. Just don't ignore that, right? And when we can really be with and listen, it's a very different experience, right?
It
i
really
i
is.
get i,
Yeah,
I really need a little more space, and it's not really possible. So what is possible, rather
yeah,
than saying, you don't need that, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's
Yeah.
such a big difference.
Mm.
One thing I wanted to ask you about, and it's based on a story I heard you talk about it on another podcast you did, is sometimes people have an issue with rushing to the end. They get up there and they're just like, I want to get off the stage as fast as possible. I'm going to race to the end. And long ago, I learned, and it worked for me, that when you have those experiences like, I got to get out of here, I mean, unless it's clearly unsafe,
Yes.
that it's a better idea to do the opposite,
Yeah.
which is to just stop and
Yeah.
really slow down.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, what do you make of that in terms of the nervous system? Because if I followed what I felt like I wanted to do, it would be to keep rushing and get out of there.
Mhm.
But when I slow down, it's almost like I do something and then my nervous system follows. That's the way it
Mm.
feels. But I'm just wondering what you think of that.
Yeah, it's interesting, because when we get that urge to rush, get me out of here, right? Some familiar cue from your past has come alive in the present moment. Something is saying, this is not safe. Get me out of here, right? And I have a discernment practice that I love to use. It's sometimes
Mm,
hard to do in the moment, but the question becomes, in this moment, right? In this place where I am right now, is this intensity of response needed? right? Because in the past it was, usually the answer is no, not needed. But asking that discernment question, and then again, I have people write that down because when you need it, you can't remember it, right? But asking that question interrupts the automaticity of the survival response. And we just need to interrupt the old response, because the old response takes you immediately to a story that you then feel is absolutely true. So, the opposite, and we again practice this when we don't need it. Feel like, oh, my system's rushing. The thing that I find the easiest to do is just sigh for a moment.
Oh my
Yeah,
God. Yes.
yeah, a little sigh. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to talk to you about sighing.
Yeah, it interrupts. So the research on sighing says it's an interrupter, a small interrupter of our experience. So just sighing gives you a tiny moment to get out of what you're in, and then you can slow down a bit.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, when we say sigh, are you talking about, because sometimes I'm a sigher.
Yeah. Well,
I
yeah.
remember I was sharing an office with somebody long ago and they're like, wow, you really sigh a lot. And I'm
A
like,
lot.
really? I was
Yeah.
completely out of consciousness. But are we talking about sort of a, like a breath? Or are we talking about more like a, like that, or both?
Both. I mean, because the what makes a sigh, I think, is it's an exhalation. So it's you focus on the exhalation. Usually has some sound with it, right? And there are lots of different flavors of sighing, right? So sometimes the other thing is everybody sighs spontaneously. Um, every hour, many times an hour. Some of us sigh more than others. But when I'm noticing I have been going really fast and it's like, oh, get me out of here. And I can sigh and then slow down. In my world, again, it's easy to notice that. I notice that out loud and say, I just noticed my system was starting to speed. Right. And I thought, oh, I just felt a need to stop that speeding train from, keeping on going. So I just sighed. Right. And now I'm noticing I can really be here with you differently. And sometimes I'll invite the audience to sigh because they've been feeling that too. Right.
Right,
Right.
right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
Oh,
so
that's
a
great.
simple little thing like that
Yeah,
is
yeah,
yeah.
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 Well, in wrapping up, one thing I want to talk about before we say goodbye is I want you to explain what a glimmer is.
Ah,
And then let's talk about how we might be able to use glimmers. I had a couple of ideas when you're speaking or on your way to speaking.
yeah.
So first, tell
Yeah.
us what a glimmer is, and then we can talk about how we can use
Love
them.
glimmers, just love glimmers. And the nervous system workbook, I think, has a glimmer section in it. And then I've just finished writing a glimmers journal. So, because I love them, I love glimmer. Glimmers are the tiny moments of ventral that appear all the time, but we miss them because we're not looking for them. And what I want to say about glimmers is they don't disavow the suffering. They don't, replace the suffering. They don't replace the anxiety or the disconnect, right? But they give us something different because the nervous system is so amazingly able to hold both the dysregulation and the moments of regulation at the same time. So we just want to say that it's not this toxic positivity that seems to be going around in the world nowadays. And what it does is it builds your capacity to be with your anxiety or your disconnection differently. So that's why they're so lovely.
So, could you give me an example of what a glimmer is?
Yes. So a glimmer could be as simple as seeing the sun poke through a cloud, hearing a bird sing, hearing your cat purr. Your first cup of coffee, that first sip can be a glimmer. It can be anything that brings you this tiny moment of feeling, in some way, right? And the fact that they're all around us makes them easily accessible, right? I often have people set a glimmer intention and see if you can notice a glimmer, just one glimmer today. And what's so fascinating is once you notice a glimmer and you have that experience, your nervous system feels good and you begin to organically look for more of them. Right. So we can do that. We can also grab onto a glimmer because once you've had a glimmer, it comes into your system and it lands somewhere. And then the next one comes in and they begin to accumulate. That's the power of glimmers. These tiny moments begin to accumulate. You can have a glimmer that think of it. You probably have one. Have you had one today? A glimmer today?
I did have one. Yeah, yeah.
So tell me
I
about
had I had one today. We've never met before,
it.
and I'd heard you speak. I know my brain said she's a nice person,
Yes,
but you never know.
right.
And so the moment you came on and whatever you said and the whole vibe, I was like, oh, this is going to be fun. This
Yeah,
is going to be great. I feel good with her. So
nice.
I had, and then, and if you'd been, grumpy in the beginning, it would have been fine. And I would have, done my best. But, so then it just opened something up in
Right,
me.
right.
So I guess that was a glimmer.
Yeah. So, and glimmers can come through a thought, like your thought was, oh, she's nice, or this is going to be good. And you
Yeah.
feel it in your body. And
Right.
so brain and body are working together. Brain and nervous system are bringing this alive together. And you can find a glimmer that you can remember, right? Because as you remember a glimmer, it brings it alive again. Right. You've gotten to know me a little bit. You know that beach stones and the beach are places that help me feel nourished and okay. So when I, am heading into something that, might be challenging, I can bring one of my beach glimmers back. And in, 10 seconds, my nervous system has brought that state back because it's all connected. So
Right.
that's a
Right.
beautiful way to use glimmers. You
Yeah.
can also look around your environment, because usually, we find a glimmer. We don't
Right.
remember,
Right.
but there's a
Yeah.
glimmer. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm just thinking in speaking,
Mhm.
I mean, I definitely tell people to speak to the friendly faces because I know that help, and that's in a way a little bit of a glimmer.
Mhm.
Um, and you've done so many things as you're prepping. I mean, wearing certain shoes that
Yep.
you feel good in, and certain outfits that
Yep.
feel good on you, and
Yep.
all those things.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like stacking the deck
Mhm.
toward having more, as many glimmers as you can possibly have.
Yeah.
I do, when I do a lot of walking,
Mhm.
and I will check people out who I'm about to pass
Yeah.
and decide if I'm going to smile at them. And
Oh,
usually I do.
yeah.
And, it's so amazing when most of them smile back, and it's like, wow,
That's a
their
glimmer.
whole face
Mhm. Yep.
lights up, and then we have a little thing, and then
Yeah.
we carry on. And I feel it in my body. And I
Yes.
mean, it's incredible to think they're feeling it in their body too, probably.
Yes. Yes.
It's amazing.
And what's interesting, as you were saying that, if you're in a place of feeling regulated, in that ventral state of joy or happy or at ease or whatever it is, and you simply smile at someone, you don't stop, and your brain doesn't go, should I, shouldn't I? You're taking in all the cues about that person, but you simply smile, you have an impact on their nervous system.
It's
Right.
amazing.
Which is so powerful.
Yeah.
Whether, if you stop and think, oh, they look a little dangerous, they look, grumpy, they're not going to, and you don't smile, then that's a different cue when you walk by.
Right. Right.
It's like oh,
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
it's so fascinating,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
That's
Yeah,
really
yeah,
amazing. Yeah.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Well, let's see. I wanted to talk about the sigh, and we did that. And yeah, we did it. We did it all. I have to say, your books are so good, and you can engage with them. Some of them are more workbooks, and some of them are more, let's read about this. But I feel like this is a topic that you really do need to kind of keep diving in, and and there's always more to learn, and to flesh out
Yeah.
the bones of it.
Yeah, it's interesting because I call it befriending the nervous system, and I talk about this somewhere that when you make a friend, you don't just meet someone and they're your lifelong friend. Right? You make a friend, you meet someone, and you get to know them, and you spend time, and you learn how, the things they like, the things they don't. Same is true for the nervous system. It is an ongoing process of discovery. We're ongoing befriending, listening, learning to read the signs, hear the signs, and hear the stories. So yeah, it's a lifelong journey that we're on, and we can get really good at it. I've been doing this a long time, and I still have a lot of messy moments. So we want to say that too, that no human is regulated all the time, nor should that be an expectation or a goal. The goal is to have your nervous system be an ally, and you work with it. And when you dysregulate, you come back to regulation, and then you reflect and go, ooh, let me think what that was. That's what we do. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. And I think that's a perfect place to wind down our conversation. I just want to thank you so much for being on the podcast. It was just an absolute pleasure to speak with you today. And I just want to say thank you, all listeners, for being there today. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Deb Dana, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye for now.